Now, in the last lesson, we've prepared all of our assets so that we can drag and drop them into our ARKit app. So you should have a video called Harry Potter in the MP4 format. You should have a main image that you're going to be using to recognize in your newspaper, and you should have your newspaper printed and ready for use. Now let's go ahead and create a new Xcode project, and make sure you select Augmented Reality app, and I'm just going to call this Magic Paper. And again, make sure you're using SceneKit and go ahead and click Next. Then feel free to save it any way you like, but I'm just going to leave it on my desktop for now. So now that we've got our brand new ARKit app, first things first, I'm going to delete the ship scene file and the texture. So let's just hit backspace and move that to trash. Next, we need to add our resources to our project. So the video, I'm simply going to drag and drop into my main folder, the yellow one here. And make sure that when you drag and drop it in, that you check this part where it says add to targets, namely that the video should be accessible by our app called Magic Paper. Make sure that this box is ticked. This is really important, and it will cause you a lot of headache later on trying to fix this if you didn't tick it. Now, if you forgot to do it, just simply delete the asset and drag it back on and make sure that box is checked. Now, the next step is to incorporate our images for AR image recognition. So you did this in the last module, so I'm going to leave it to you as a challenge and see if you can incorporate the main image that we're going to detect. All right, so this shouldn't be too hard. All we need to do is head into assets.exe assets, and we're going to right click in this white area here, and we're going to create a new AR resources group. And then I'm going to rename this AR resources group to our newspaper images. And this is the area where we need to drag in our image, which is this one. It's called Harry Potter, remember? And when we drag it in, it will always complain because it doesn't have a physical dimension. Now, the physical dimension depends on the size of the paper that you've printed out the newspaper on. So once you've printed out the newspaper, you can use a ruler to measure the size of this image. So mine turns out to be about 7.6 centimeters in height. So let's put 0.076 and it'll calculate the width automatically. And now that warning goes away and we've successfully incorporated the image that we want to detect. Now next we can head into our view controller and we can start writing some code. But before we do that, let's make sure we delete all of this part that relates to that ship scene, which we deleted earlier on. And that's the rocket ship that gets included automatically in all the new ARKit templates. Here's another challenge, because I know you've done it before, and it's always good to practice. Write some code to make our image recognizable, so that when you run the app, you should be able to print something into the debug console that says the image of Harry Potter inside the asset.exe assets was recognized. So again, we've done this in the previous module. So if you need to refresh yourself by looking at the previous lessons, then go ahead and do that. But if you really get stuck, then come back and I'll walk you through the solution. Okay, so first things first, we are now tracking an image. So we need to change this to AR image tracking configuration. And in between creating the configuration and running the configuration, we need to do a few more things. We need to tell it which images to track. So we need to create an object called tracked images. And this is going to be equal to AR reference image dot reference images and in group named. So the string that we put in here has to match the name of this folder. So we called it newspaper images and that all the words are capitalized. Newspaper images. And the bundle is of course the main bundle, so the current location of this app. This is, again, if you remember, going to be an optional because this might not exist, so it might be nil. So we need to either unwrap this or use optional binding to keep ourselves safe. Once we are certain that there definitely are tracked images, then we're going to set our configuration to tell it that the images it should be tracking are the ones that we specified above. And finally, we need to say that our configuration currently only takes a maximum of 1 images to be tracked simultaneously. And now we can check to make sure that these newspaper images definitely do exist and they can be used as reference images for tracking. And we're going to do that inside the iflet, and we're going to say images found. And let's go ahead and hit run. But before we do that, let's make sure that we select a team so that we can successfully sideload our app. And remember, sideloading all ARKit apps requires a physical device. So down here, images found, that means that this iflet statement was true and it was able to locate this newspaper images group. So now that's done, we can delete that. And the next step is we need to write some more code to create a plane to put our AR content onto the main image. So again, we've done this before. We just need to generate a white rectangle that shows up on the location of the tracked image. So again, I'm going to encourage you to pause the video and try to complete this as a challenge. All right, so in order to receive the events from our scene when it detects a new image, we need to add a delegate method, and we're going to add it down here, which are the AR scene view delegates. And the one that we need is the same as the one that we used before, which is renderer node for anchor. So the anchor is the image that it found or recognized, and we need to return a node to be displayed in our scene. So here is where we're going to be writing our code. And first and foremost, we're going to create a new node, which is a SCN node. And then we're going to check to see if this anchor is actually of the data type of AR image anchor rather than just a generic AR anchor. Let's go ahead and do an iflet statement to check if let image anchor equals the anchor that was found as, so casting its data type as a AR image anchor. If that is true, then we can do some stuff using this image anchor. And after all of that stuff is done, we're going to return our node. So up here, we've created our brand new SceneKit node, and then we're going to use the image anchor, which recognized the image on the scene, to add our plane and our rectangle. And then inside here, we're going to add some 3D content to our node. And once all of that's done, we're going to return the node and render it onto the scene. So now inside this iflet statement, we need to create our plane. Let's create a plane that is, of course, of type SCN plane, and we need to give it some dimensions. So we're going to use the anchor's physical dimensions. So we're going to say that the width is equal to image anchor dot reference image dot physical size dot width, and the same thing for the height. So image anchor dot reference image dot physical size dot height. Okay, so now we have our plane created, and we're going to set its material diffuse dot content to a new UI color. And it's just going to be a white square. So we're going to say 1.0 for white, completely white. And then the alpha, we'll just put 0.5 to give it a little bit of transparency. And now that we've created our scene plane, let's create a plane node. This is going to be of data type SCN node, and it has a geometry of the plane that we just created. And now remember that our plane always gets rendered at 90 degrees to the image that was recognized. So as we did in the last lesson, we need to change, or rather rotate it, by tapping into the Euler angle property, and we're going to change its x dimension to minus pi divided by 2. And that just rotates it anti-clockwise by half pi, which is by 90 degrees. And so that it's flat and flush with the image that was recognized. And now finally, we're going to tap into this node that we created right at the top, and we're going to say add child node, and that is going to be this plane node that we created. And now we're ready to test our app and see if we managed to complete that challenge. So as soon as we load up the newspaper, you can see that our white rectangle gets rendered onto the newspaper, and it's pretty much flush and matching the dimensions of that image. And even if I sort of move it around and bend it around, it's still able to keep track of the location. So pretty neat, right? Well done if you managed to do this all by yourself. Don't worry if you've forgotten how to do it and you have to look back at the previous lessons. It's the repetition and the reminders that will really help you to turn this into your own. And so that in the future, when you need to build this feature into your apps, you'll be reminded of this tutorial and of this challenge. Now, up till now, we haven't really done anything new that we haven't done in the last module. But in the next lesson is where we're going to start incorporating SpriteKit in order to render some video onto that plane that we just created based off the dimensions of the image that we detected. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.